Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasts and your prayers and your supplications during this holy month. Yesterday we briefly touched upon the general theme of the month of Ramadan, and we spoke about fasting as being the most prominent feature of this month. It's a month that God has made fasting obligatory upon everybody. It's not a choice. Unless, of course, you are sick or you're traveling or you're too old to fast. There are some exceptions, but for the majority of the people, fasting is obligatory. And the idea of making fasting obligatory upon us brings up the question of justice when it comes to God. Why does God force us to do something? If it's something that's good for us, He should just tell us and explain it to us, and if we want to do it, we end up doing it, and if we don't want to, we have the free will to do that. So why does God sometimes ordain things upon us? Why does religion say that there are things that you have to do? It's not a choice. If you don't do it, you'll be punished for it. Yesterday we briefly talked about this by saying that humans in their own nature, they're inclined towards doing things that are not good for themselves. This is part of the human nature. In order for us to do something that's beneficial for ourselves, it usually takes a lot of struggle, a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties, a lot of work and conviction. But if you leave the humans on their own, for the most part, they end up deciding to do things that are not good for themselves. If you have a child, for example, if the parents don't raise that child in a proper way, they don't teach them what's right and wrong, they don't put certain rules in the house, the child usually is inclined towards doing things that is not good for himself or herself. For example, if you allow the kid to access the candy jar anytime they want, they're not going to be able to regulate themselves. Because usually when we get hooked onto things like sugar, we get hooked onto things like colors and images, certain pleasures, when we get addicted to these things, our body with that addiction builds a certain connection with that thing, and it becomes biological that we have to do this thing. It becomes part of our biological system. This is why a lot of people suffer from addictions. They have to go through therapies, they have to go through programs to get themselves out of addictions. Smoking is a prime example of that. If you look at the people who want to quit smoking, there are many, many programs out there that help an individual quit smoking. If it was something that was easy, any person would decide to quit smoking and that's the end of it. But no, you have nicotine patches, you have nicotine gums, you have programs, you have this. Alcohol is the same thing. People who get hooked onto alcohol, they have to go through a lot of difficulty to detach themselves from this and clean themselves. Same thing goes with drugs. Now these are very apparent drugs. More subtle things function the same way in our human body and mind. Sugar, for example, another substance that people get addicted to, and you feel you need to have that sugar intake every day, and so on and so forth. So all these things that we get hooked onto, the body doesn't realize it. It's very subtle. You begin with it very slowly, very innocently, maybe a small dosage here, a small test over there. Slowly over time, this habit, this addiction starts building up without you realizing. Then you find yourself, you can't live without this thing. So when the human nature is like this, you can't leave it up to the human being to always decide what's best for themselves. If you have a caring God, this God wants what's best for the human being. So He uses certain methods to force us into detaching ourselves from things. Because this is what we need as human beings. If we look at the verse that talks about fasting, God connects fasting and not eating and not drinking during the day with the idea of having mercy come upon us, so that we experience that mercy of God. And that mercy is not just, freedom from hellfire or going to heaven. No. Mercy is for our own well-being as well. To have mercy upon ourselves is to regain control over our bodies and our minds. This is the definition of having mercy and being merciful upon ourselves and towards others as well. So fasting is directly connected to this notion. And the reason it was made obligatory is because if it was left up to us, we would probably not perform this. Because look at throughout the whole year, there are so many days that we could fast. A lot of recommended fasts. Every month, at least 3 days are recommended. The white nights, for example. The day of Thursday, for example. Any day of the week, we could fast. But for the most part, we find ourselves not really fasting any day of the year. The majority of us. It kind of indicates to us that if it was left up to us, we would probably choose not to fast, not to endure hardships, not to go through difficulties, and just allow our lives to continue the way they are, even though, on the long run, it's harming us. So this might be one reason why God said that you have to fast. It's a forced upon you thing, and not a choice that you're given. Because just like a parent, decides that this is not good for the child might think it's harmful, but in reality it's beneficial to that child. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To go back to the sermon of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, before the month of Ramadan, and hopefully today we would finish going over the sermon so that we can start with the other topics, inshallah, starting from tomorrow night. The Prophet tries to present this month by explaining to us that the month in and of itself is a special month. It's not that we're only fasting during this month. No. This month of Ramadan is distinguished. It's a distinct month. It has a specific flavor, a specific atmosphere that we would not have known existed had it not been for Gabriel telling the Prophet on behalf of God that this time is a special time. Of course, as human beings, the first thing that we're connected to is the physical world around us. We see things through our eyes, through our senses, through our smell, through our taste, through our touch. This is the direct connection we have with the world around us. On the spiritual level, we're usually not that connected. And if we do connect to the spiritual world, we're not that aware of all the subtleties and the secrets of that world. The prophets, on the other hand, they have access to those secrets. They're able to see the effects of the spiritual realities and the beings that happen in this world that we can't see and we can't feel. The Prophet, for example, is able to tell us that Thursday night is a special night. Angels descend on that night. When you perform certain worships on Thursday night, they're counted much more, and the blessings are much higher than other nights of the week. Friday is the same thing. If you think about it, the hadith that we have, it says that the day of Friday is just as blessed and sacred as the night of Thursday. If you think about it, from night of Thursday to the end of the day of Friday, which becomes the nighttime, it's a whole revolution of the earth. The earth revolves around one complete time. So it's as if that whole revolution is one complete night. So Thursday and Friday are blessed. How did we know that? The Prophet told us. How did the Prophet know? God told him. He's able to know these things. During the year, are there special months? Yes. The Prophet said there's a special month and it's called the month of God. During this month, the activity in the spiritual world is different than the activity during the rest of the year. Angels are descending, going up and down. The mercy of God is multiplied during this month. The forgiveness of God is multiplied during this month. In fact, during this month, the Prophet says that is so different and so wonderful that you just breathing as a believer during this month is an act of tasbih, glorifying of God. You don't even have to say anything. During the rest of the year, you have to, glorify God by His name. You have to recite things. But in the month of Ramadan, the Prophet said just breathing in itself is a form of tasbih. Sleeping, the Prophet says, is a form of worship. Other days of the year, sleeping might not be such a good thing if you oversleep. But during this month, your whole being as a believer, just being connected to God, as a believer, you have this special realization and experience that you don't have during the rest of the year. Another special thing that the Prophet tells us about is that whoever recites one verse of the Quran during this month is as if he recited the whole Quran. So in a regular month, you have to recite the whole Quran to count as a recitation of the whole book. During this month, reciting one verse equals a recitation of the whole Quran during other days of the year. This is such a great blessing that we have. And it shows us that religion wants things to happen easily for us. In the verse that talks about Shahr Ramadan, inshallah tomorrow we'll go into more detail about that. God says that He wants to make it easy for you and not difficult. The idea of religion wanting to make things easier for us is something that we see throughout our ahadith and throughout the Quran. So God is saying, here's the month that I'm giving you that can equal more than all the months of the year. Laylatul Qadr, the night of destiny. One night during this month is greater than 1,000 months. Imagine the actions that we do on that night, the actions that we do during these days are multiplied benefits. This is really a beautiful experience of the mercy of God. So it's a month that we can take advantage of. We slacked off throughout the year. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that I'm giving you a special discount month over here. Special offers from the beginning to the end. You recite one verse of the Quran, I'll count it as the whole Quran. So take as much as you want. And God is very generous. As the Prophet said in the sermon, that we are the guests of God. And when there's a generous host, they'll put food down, they'll put everything down. And God is the most generous of beings. So as His guests, we should take advantage of that. When you have someone who's generous and saying, here, take whatever you want. As much as you want, there's no limit to what you want, what you can take. A person who sees that treasure in front of them should take as much as they can. And this is something that we have to, inshallah, focus on during this month, because during the rest of the year, we don't have this opportunity. The most important thing during this month is to reform our character and reform ourselves, to fix certain bad habits that we have. This is a good opportunity for us to purify ourselves and to treat each other in a better way. It's a month of mercy. Because it's a month of mercy, we have to start expressing mercy towards other people. If we have relatives or friends that we cut off, let's try to use this month to fix those relationships. If we've done something wrong to someone, let's learn how to apologize to that individual. Let's make this month a different month in our lives. A month that we can reform our spirits and come out of it as better people. It's a good opportunity for us. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another thing that the Prophet says during this month is that your actions are accepted by God. In other months, you might have to do extra focus in your prayers, maybe extra focus in your recitation of the Quran for it to be accepted. But during this month, whatever you do, God accepts your actions. Another thing the Prophet says is that your prayers are answered during this month. The heavens are open. Whatever you have to ask for. But there's one condition, that it has to be sincere. You have to ask it from your heart. And God said that I will grant you what you ask for. And inshallah, before the night of destiny, where everything is written for the next year, we try to reform ourselves and become sincere in what we ask for. So the Prophet says, فَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ بِنِيَّةٍ صَادِقَةٍ وَقُلُوبٍ طَاهِرَةٍ أَنْ يُوَفِّقَكُمْ لِصِيَامِهِ وَتِلَاوَةِ كِتَابِهِ. So ask your Lord with sincere intentions and pure hearts that you are given the success to fast during this month and to recite His holy book. فَإِنَّ الشَّقِيَّ مَنْ حُرِمَ غُفْرَانَ اللَّهِ فِي هَذَا الشَّهْرِ الْعَظِيمِ. Only the most evil and wicked person is the one that is deprived of forgiveness in this month. And inshallah, none of us in this gathering fall under that category. This is how easy it is to be forgiven. You have to be one of the most wicked people on earth to not be forgiven during this month. And that's because you decide that you don't want forgiveness. Everyone else, we have an open door to forgiveness. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up our hearts during this month, to give us tawfiq, to ask for forgiveness, to recite the holy book, and to connect with it, and to be able to purify our souls and ourselves. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin.